In section 3.6, we will be looking at different types of triangles. The first triangle that we will be talking about is a scalene triangle. A scalene triangle is defined as a triangle in which no two sides are congruent. Now, since we know that the sides correspond to the angle opposite the side, if all three sides are not congruent, or no two sides are congruent, then that will also mean that no two angles will be congruent in a scalene triangle. The next triangle we'll talk about is an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle is first defined as a triangle that has at least two sides congruent. In this diagram, if we mark these two sides congruent, these would be called the legs. The angle that sandwiches in between the two legs will be called our vertex angle. Finally, the other side that is not the legs will be called the base. And the angles that sandwich between the base will be called the base angles. A theorem that we'll be exploring a little bit later shows that because the sides of an isosceles are congruent and that the opposite angles correspond to those sides, the angles, or the base angles, will also be congruent. The third triangle we'll look at is an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle has all three congruent sides. And again, because the sides correspond to the angles, all three of the angles in the equilateral triangle will be congruent. Since we know that a triangle is 180 degrees, each one of these angles in an equilateral triangle will be 60 degrees. Another important thing to know is that equilateral just doesn't apply to a triangle. It actually applies to any figure that has all sides that are congruent. Another important word is equiangular. This triangle is equiangular because all of the angles are congruent. And again, this can be used in any type of figure in which all angles are congruent. A couple things to think about. Can an equilateral figure be equiangular? And vice versa. Can an equiangular figure be equilateral? Consider a four-sided rhombus. We'll learn about the definition of a rhombus later, but a rhombus is a figure